Well, let's talk about Ukraine. Russia is targeting the civilian infrastructure, trying to deprive Ukrainians of heat, water, and electricity. Another brutal winter approaches. What do you think? Is Russia, how are they approaching this winter, do you think? Is it crank up the misery, crank up the suffering, and see if that has any kind of an effect?
I think it's going to be a variation of what we were just talking about with China, but sort
Yeah.
of on the battlefield and, of course, in the cities and towns across Ukraine. The Russians understand that they themselves are under a lot of pressure because it hasn't gone well for them in this war. But I think they're seeing an opportunity here. They're saying, okay, it's going to be a long, cold, difficult winter for the Ukrainians. Even though the Ukrainians might galvanize, because they feel this sort of, we're being oppressed by the Russians, attacked by the Russian, our country could go away if we give up fighting. They understand that that's a very strong reaction inside of Ukraine. But also, you've got an elderly population, you've got very young populations, you got kids in hospitals, some of whom are being killed by the artillery fire. So, the Ukrainians are in a difficult position. But the Russians also understand that, as I was talking about earlier, the West is also under some pressure. How long can Europe continue to push on with the energy issues that the Ukrainian war is resulting in difficult times for them? How long is the United States going to continue the massive shipment of weapons there? So they're playing for time. They're playing for the long run. And this winter is going to be a very interesting long-term prospect, I think, for the Russians.
Absolutely. But let's talk about this little piece of video, which I think is very interesting. From Friday. It was Russia's Mother's Day. Vladimir Putin meeting with mothers of Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine, seeming to reassure them that spirits remain high among his troops. This is all Russian propaganda, of course. I mean, they cherry pick the mothers that they want to have in the room with Vladimir Putin and so on. But this is despite widespread reports of Russian soldiers not having enough to eat, Russian mothers launching an anti-war petition. How telling is this photo op? It's interesting. It's Putin's way of saying, "Oh, I've got everything under control," but it's revealing in that he has to do this.
Yeah, and I think it's worth asking, why? Why sit down with these mothers? Why not sit down with, others? But the issue here is that Putin recalls how badly this ended in the Chechen wars that he was involved in when he first came to power. In both the Chechen and the Afghan wars, you had a really strong internal movement on the part of the mothers of Russian soldiers fighting in that time in Chechnya and also in Afghanistan. And surprisingly, these self-organized groups that were not funded by the United States or by any other foreign government, like the Russians often accuse these opposition groups of being. These were mothers that actually caused real serious problems in Russian society for the Russian government because of those previous wars. Vladimir Putin remembers that and does not want that to happen again in Ukraine. And so I think he's trying to be proactive here and sit down, provide these photo opportunities. You're absolutely right. It's all propaganda. They're cherry picked, but it plays well internally inside of Russia to other mothers who might be concerned about, what their kids and sons specifically are being put up against in Ukraine. So I think he's trying to stay out ahead of a problem that could materialize for him if he's not careful.
Yeah, that problem being the mothers who are tired of seeing their sons go off to Ukraine and dying. All right, Steve Hall, thank you very much. We appreciate it.